Hey everyone, today we're going to be looking at pages 24 and 25 in your lesson book. As you can see, we're working in the key of A major. The key of A major has three sharps, and those sharps are called F, C, and G. So we're dealing with F sharps, C sharps, and G sharps. We'll start with 125, going through each string and playing every note in first position in that key. So that fits in that finger pattern. So starting with the E string, violins, we have a 2-3 pattern here. So here we go. Onto the A string, another 2-3 pattern. Here we go. On the D string, we have a 3-4 pattern. That's to get the third finger G sharp in, so it's a high 3. Here's the D string. And here's where things start to get a little bit strange. Remember I said that our sharps in the key of A major are F, C, and G. That means every G we play has to be a sharp. So when you look on the G string pattern, we actually cannot play open G. The note we have to play is G sharp. And the way that you make that note on your instrument is to do a low 1 on the G string. So if your first finger normally goes here, you're going to back it up a half step, and that's going to be G sharp. After you play that, you have to move your first finger back into first position so that you can keep doing the rest of the finger pattern. So violins and violas, it tells us it's a 3-4 finger pattern, but it's a 3-4 finger pattern starting from the A. The first thing you do is G sharp, then move to A, and then we do the 3-4 finger pattern. So here we go. Good, and it's the same thing with the C string. We actually did this in the key of D major last time. We have C sharp, so we can't play open C. So let's go for that one. Here we go. Good, so that's all of the finger patterns in first position on each string. Now moving to 126, we're doing the finger patterns in third position. So starting on the E string, put our first finger in third position with a 3-4 pattern. Here we go. Good, the A string has an open pattern, all whole steps. Now here's where things get a little bit strange. We did talk about this last time, but just like with the G string, you couldn't play open G. When we think about third position, normally our first finger on the D string would go on the note G. We don't want G, we want G sharp. So what you're going to do is take your first finger and go up a half step to make it a half step higher. And it will be a 1-2 pattern, so you just start with that high 1 and set your second finger goes right next to it. The cellos, they actually do call that 3.5 position. For some reason, they don't call it that for violins and violas. They just expect you to know that you move your hand up. I think it makes sense to call that 3.5 position because it has a different starting point. So right now, find third position and then move your finger up a tiny bit, a half step, and it's going to sound like, let's see here, like this. That's your G sharp. Okay, so here we go. And stay in that 3.5 position and just pop over to G because it's the same deal. We're wanting the note C sharp with our first finger. Here we go with that. And same deal here with the C string. So we're starting on an F sharp. Here we go. Good. All right, looking at 127 now, the A major scale. Remember, we're going to play all of these like they're a quarter note to make that a little bit easier as we're working on these notes. Violas have actually the hardest thing in this. Violas have something new. I'll get to that in a second. But violins, you'll notice that you don't have to shift at all for this scale. There's one major thing that you have to remember, and other than that, this should not be too difficult. So we're starting with violins. You're starting with A, one finger on G. All right. And as you go up the scale, you need to make sure that on the G and D strings, you have high threes. You want a C sharp on the G and a G sharp on the D. Okay? Once you get to the second measure, that's just an A major scale that you've known since the 4th grade. So that part is very easy. It's that beginning that's tough, and it's remembering the high three. Violas, on the second measure, you suddenly go to treble clef, and that note is an A. That would normally be your open A, but you can see they've actually asked you to shift to 4th position. Now, if you've never done 4th position before, I always say 3rd position is when you put your first finger where your 3rd finger would normally go, while 4th position, it's the same deal. You put your first finger where your 4th finger would normally go. So violas, as you're playing, your next note would be open A, but you are not going to play open A. You're going to shift to 4th position and play the note A. This is your open A string. That note with your first finger. Okay, and once you find it, you're going to actually, this is the 3-4 pattern the rest of the time. Do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then over on the A string, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's how you're going to play your A major scale. Try not to worry so much about the treble clef. I know it's difficult to read, but you're just going up stepwise like a scale. So that should make it a little easier for you to think about that way. Cellos, you do have to go to 5th and a half position, so you get pretty high, but that shouldn't be anything too new. You should kind of understand how to do it intuitively, even if you haven't played 5th and a half position before. In our lessons, we'll go through and mark where the half steps are, where the closed fingers need to be. But right now, we're going to play this scale like it's in quarter notes. Every note is a quarter note. And I'm going to play it the viola way with the shift in the middle. Violins, you just hang out in 1st position the whole time. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Awesome. Okay, let's move on now. We're going to skip a little bit down to number 130, the Yellow Rose of Texas. Now we're taking what we've learned with the finger patterns and the scales and where our fingers go in this key signature and applying it to this tune. We're going to go through a little bit of it right now together. So after we play the E, D, the pickup, those first 2 eighth notes, the very first note of the actual first measure is a C, and we need to remember that that is a C sharp. So it's either high 3 if you're a violin, viola, or it's an extension if you're a cello. You're going to stretch that 4th finger. So it's going to sound like this. Sounds a little funky. If you don't know this tune, I can see how you might actually think that's wrong, but that is exactly how this melody of this tune goes. So if you're getting this, that's not correct. That's putting my 3rd finger where it would normally go. So you need to stretch or extend that 3rd finger a little bit higher. Then we played just a bunch of stuff in 1st position. That should be pretty easy. When we get to the 3rd complete measure, there is a shift for violins and violas. And you're going to go up to third position and play 2, 3, 4. But there's something important here that we have to remember. This is an open pattern, so we're going to have 2, 3, and then a stretch to 4. So don't do what we usually do and put your fourth finger next to your third finger. There needs to be a space between all of your fingers. Okay? Then we're up there on that C sharp. And our next note is an E. We don't want to shift back. This is a little bit tough, but we don't want to shift back to our first finger. We're actually going to pop over to the G string and play that E with 3 fingers. So that's probably the hardest part of this whole thing. The rest of it is not that bad. So violins and violas, make sure you practice that weird shift where you have to pop onto G for a minute to play the E. Everything else is not bad at all. It actually looks like cellos never have to shift. So be mindful of your key signature, but no shifting for the cellos. So I'm going to play through this whole thing. I am not going to repeat. I'm going to go right to the second ending when I get there. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. You ready to do 3 fingers? Here it is, 3. Good, and as I was playing, I realized I misspoke when I told you that it was an open pattern on the D string. It is a 1-2 pattern. The first and second finger are close, but what I was referring to were the third and fourth finger that are spaced out. So it's not an open pattern. That was, I said that incorrectly. So I didn't want you to look over to the other page and say that it actually was a 1-2 pattern. So it is a 1-2 pattern. Moving on here to 131. This one is not too bad. Again, we spend a lot of our time in first position. So getting a hang of playing in the key of A major in first position, which is still tough. We don't play in this key nearly enough in orchestra, and that's something we will start doing. But I want to draw your attention, and everyone has this, to the very first shift you have. You are shifting to a D sharp. So this is just like how on the G and D strings we had the 3.5 position. They've just added this in as an accidental. So don't freak out when you see that, but you have to know what that means. They're wanting you to go up to 3.5 position when you shift. So that first beginning part, just so you can hear what it sounds like. You want to go right up to a little bit higher than third position, and then your second finger goes right next to it. So it's D sharp and then E. Okay. What I'm going to do is just play right through this. Like I said, it's not really a lot of shifting. It's just knowing which notes to play in the key of A major. I will have a little pause because I have to turn my page, but we should all be able to stick together here and play this one. So here I go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. All right. So that's the key of A major. Take some time to work through these, and we will go through them in your lesson.